Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me for another edition of Digital Soul Presents. I'm honored to have this brother on. This brother I've known for quite a few years now, and always is the one of my humble brothers here. Has came on our show before on the Purple Brothers with myself and Big Room. We talked a couple of years ago, so we're gonna catch up today. Multi-talented trombonist, arranger, performer, played with some legends, P-Funk, Prince, Chuck Brown, you name it. The list goes on. He's a legend himself, Mr. Greg Tromboyer. Boyer.
How's it going today, man?
Oh man, I'm doing well. How about yourself, my brother?
Doing great, man.
Man, I'm so glad to have you back, and to stop and take time to talk with me a little bit here. We can catch up, on things and everything like that, man. So, how's everything been going?
Yeah, I mean, the Sixers and the Knicks went into overtime, but it was still over soon enough for me to make it here. So.
I always got to take a moment to catch up on the games. No
Yeah,
doubt,
yeah.
no doubt. So I know you've been I've been I follow you of course and seeing you've been moving bobbing and weaving, man. You're playing with quite a few people, staying busy, keeping the blood flowing on stage, man. How does it feel to be back out there on stage and doing your thing? I know we talked a little bit after the pandemic previous.
Yeah,
Now it's really in motion.
yeah. I feel like I'm back in my natural habitat now. But even stranger than that is, I feel like I'm busier now after the pandemic than I was before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's even with touring more. I'm not touring as much as I used to because with Maceo, man, he'd be gone 400 days out of a year. So and I haven't done that. He is since retired from performing, but I'm able to keep the calendar somewhat full,
Yeah.
more so now than I did, like I said, before the pandemic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've grown up on the east side back in Baltimore, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, from Bryans Road, Maryland, which is in Southern Maryland.
Okay.
And my connection with Baltimore started when I went to St. Mary's College, and Benny Cowan was my roommate my freshman year.
Uh,
And that, along with playing in the college jazz band for my junior and senior year in high school. So I was already, in my third year almost of playing down there at the college by the time I was a freshman.
yeah. Okay.
But I ran into Benny down.
I knew you guys knew each other, played together a long time, but I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, man.
That's
Yeah.
dope.
I've been playing with Benny since I was 16 or 17 years old.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. Wow. So you guys got chemistry like no other.
Even on the days we don't have chemistry, we have history. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what was it like little Greg back then growing up? Because I know me and you talked before, and you got interested in music very very early. What was that
Yeah.
like, growing up as a small kid and then finding out your love of music back in the East Side?
Yeah. Well, it was one point in my life I thought I was going to grow up and play baseball. I got bat left and right handed. I was big on stats. And then, when you go from 12 years old to 13 years old, everything is 1.5 times size of
Yeah.
what you used to. And I was up there at bat, and somebody threw some chin music at me, man. And you could hear the seams whistling, barely missed my jaw. And that's when I said, I got to rethink my baseball aspirations. and But I've been playing music, man, since I was 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it started out alto sax, and then switched to baritone sax, tuba, bass, trombone, bassoon. I was playing everything in the room by the time I graduated, but my main focus was playing tuba.
Yeah.
And when I got down to the college, I was playing tuba and bass trombone, and then I went from bass to tenor trombone. So I'd only been gigging on trombone for about a year before I joined P-Funk at 19.
Yeah. When you were trying out on those different horns, was it just
Yeah.
curiosity?
Yeah, I was just happy to be able to get, something resembling some music out of all of them.
Yeah.
You know, broke code on it,
Yeah.
and then eventually ended up sticking with just one.
What is your earliest memory, like falling in love with music in a young age? Like, was it an artist, was it a song, was it something you saw on TV? What was your first memory that was like, ah, that's it?
Probably television. I mean, between the Tonight Show and I Love Lucy and various big bands that would show up on TV and stuff, that was, my earliest introduction. Now, I will say this. There was a band across the street and they used to practice on their porch.
Okay.
And they played the horse, da 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 da, da, but they jacked it up. And I said to myself, I'm going to learn how to play an instrument, and I'm going to go across the street and show them how to play it right.
And you did.
Or they disbanded long before I got an instrument in my hands and was good enough to go over there. But I just remember hearing that, and my mom joked and said the boys sound like cops and robbers.
You probably want to scream every time you heard him play it.
Oh man, I was like, oh God. I said, that ain't it. But more than anything, I like, how can you sound like that and not know that it's wrong? They were like playing it that way for like consecutive days. So if y'all are listening,
what's the name of that band again?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's hilarious. But that's really cool. I remember like I know, it probably was a lot newer then, like I Love Lucy and the Tonight Show, but I remember my fond memories of TV, watching I Love Lucy as a child and all
Yeah.
those. Later on it would be like Flip Wilson, like the variety shows, Tony Orlando and Dawn and things like
Oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah. A lot of good memories and good artists back then.
And then a step further than that, then they start having like Midnight Special and Don Kirshner's rock concert. And you couldn't really count American Bandstand or Soul Train because most of those bands showed up and they was just, lip syncing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every once in a while they let somebody play for real.
Right.
And we'd be like, oh man, look, they playing for real this time. James Brown wouldn't lip sync. So you saw him on Soul Train, it was live. Mm-hmm. But that was my musical backdrop as a fledgling musician.
Yeah. What was some of your favorite music back then, growing up as a teenager?
Jazz, definitely.
Jazz.
My parents had a huge record collection, mostly my mom, and I was listening to that from when I was, in diapers and stuff. So I absorbed all of that music, and we had a pecking order with the turntable. So after my mom and dad would get sick of playing records, then it was the oldest. So my oldest brother is big on James Brown. And he gets sick of playing music. Then my older sister would come up and she would play Motown. And then that, and oh yeah, they had the Beatles cartoon when I was little, so I got a good dose of their catalog before I started playing, and it was just everywhere. That's something that you don't see or hear a lot of now is people having big music system speakers and turntables and stuff in their house. Everything's been condensed to like a phone or playing music in the car. And you don't have that big old I'm playing music and everybody can hear it kind of situation that we had when we were coming up.
Not to mention what we were talking about earlier, man, we don't have no more of those variety shows and like that anymore with all those good performers and good comedy, the sketch comedy and all that anymore. All that.
Yeah. I mean, we do have, late night TV shows. They have house bands and stuff. So that is probably the right now version of us listening to Johnny Carson when we were little.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah. But really, if you're a kid now and you say, I want to learn how to play trumpet, like, fill in the blank. There's nothing on TV that's going to represent anything that would be an inspiration to you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Very true. I can see that. I can't think of anything or anybody right off the top of my head right.
Yeah. I mean, we have YouTube and all this other stuff and everything, but you have to know what you're looking for. It's just not in your face you know, without you having to control what you're watching.
Right.
You have to go and seek it. So, there's a lot of information at your disposal, but you have a need or a desire to look for it. Otherwise, it's just a blank screen and nowhere to go and nothing to do.
That was around 19, but in between that time, I know that you got your feet wet with some local bands around the neighborhood as a teenager. Talk a
Oh
little bit,
yeah.
yeah, talk a little bit about, getting your feet wet back in the day.
My first gig was on tenor sax, strangely enough, with a local band called The Chosen Few. And, I was the kid in the band. I wasn't allowed to drink, and I had to borrow my mom's car, and everybody else owned theirs. So, but I had the distinction of being able to nail Mr. Magic note for note, and it was just calling me Little Grover behind my back and everything. And that's pretty much how I came up. Then, of course, you're never the only band on the show. You got to hear other local groups.
Yeah.
Sometimes, there's groups that made records and some that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some that had a budget for a large PA and you don't. But I was still out there doing it, with a whole bunch of other people. And I switched to trombone as a gig when I was 18. And then, a year later, like I mentioned earlier, I was doing that other thing. Yeah. It's funny how the progression was. I went from this place, playing in clubs where, they would track so much mud in, the floor was almost like a layer of dirt, playing for $1 a night, going from that directly to playing 15 and 20,000 seat arenas. I felt like I never worked my way up. It just went from here to there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there's some lessons I might have, gotten around, and, some lessons I wish that I had taken my time getting to that spot, but, is what it is.
Yeah. Into the P-Funk at 19, and that was through an arrangement with you and Maceo, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talk a little bit about your entry into that with Brother Maceo.
Well, we were able to play with P-Funk a lot. The reason behind that was Bootsy and P-Funk weren't touring together anymore. Bootsy had just gotten too big to tour with somebody. So he left and he took a horn section with him, the horny horns, with the James Brown lineage, was only natural that they'd end up over there. So, P-Funk was, they were in the middle of having some horn sections, what is known as chops now, with Daryl Dixon and Valerie Drayton, Clay Lowry, Danny Cortez. Yeah, the four of them, they were there. Then they had a little shake up, and Skeet called and said, get a horn section together. Now, let me backpedal a little bit. I had dropped out of school, Benny and I had dropped out of school in December of 77 because we were going to pursue bigger and better things than St. Mary's College had in store for us. So, we're pedaling around and everything, and we hooked up with Greg Thomas.
Okay.
And we were playing in this group called POT, People of Tomorrow, and it featured a lot of the who's who in Baltimore. And it was always that thing of, and Bootsy's going to produce us. It's funny. That's like the textbook reason for having a band together, wanting to keep them, is so and so, some big name person is going to produce us. And I never saw Bootsy, and the band fell apart. So we were stuck as three people as a horn section with no band. And it was a couple of weeks after that, Skeet called Greg, because Greg and Dennis and Skeet and Kevin Oliver and Gary Hudge all played in a band together called Uncle Remus. And so Skeet was like, hey, Greg, get a horn section together. There's an opening, and learn this and show up at this hotel on such and such a day and show these guys you can play. And we auditioned for P-Funk in February of 78. Now, this is 2 years, I mean, not 2 years, 2 months after we quit, totally unrelated. And we auditioned in February of 78, and March of 78, they sent us plane tickets to join the band. And that's where I was for the next 19 years.
Talk about, I know you said you went to Union. Talk about that first, do you remember the first night that you stepped out there, that first time? What
Yeah.
was that feeling? Were you nervous? Was it excitement?
Oh,
What was going through your mind?
oh, that was definitely nerves, because I wasn't used to seeing anything like that. Plus, I was a huge P-Funk fan before I got in the band.
Yeah.
I fashioned my artwork after Pedro Bell, and I knew all of the names on the cover. So we went to audition in the hotel room, and I'm saying, wow, that's Gary Scheider. That's Boogie. That's Ray Davis. That's Jeanette and Debbie. And this Jerome Braley, who was playing drums on a pillow while we rolling out all the horn lines from Funkadelic versus Placebo Syndrome, which had just dropped. So, and I was like, wow, I'm just seeing all my heroes. So when it finally get to Huntsville, Alabama was our first show. And George walks on. First time I seen George in person. And I was like, it's a him. he walked over and said, hey man, you guys new horn section. He said, welcome to the band. He sounded and felt so much like a human being. I was like, the whole thing I thought was going to happen. The room was going to glow and he was going to put on there. It didn't happen. But that did not stop us from being nervous that night. So, I'm sitting over there like, okay, what I'm going to do, play this part. Road manager looks over and says, hey, man, you look a little bit nervous. He says, here, boom, smoke this. It was, I can say this now, it was some really good Colombian red. And of course, and it settled me right away. I was like, yeah, we could do this now. Yeah, I was chilly as a Frigidaire, man. I was good to go.
Floated right through it.
Oh, yeah.
I know you mentioned that you were a fan of the P before you got with the band. What was some of your favorite albums or songs before you actually got into the band?
My favorite album probably still is to this day was Let's Take It to the Stage.
Yeah.
It has so much on it. It had some of the old, Eddie and Boogie weren't in the band when I got there. So I'm listening to Good Ear Earhole, and I'm hearing them, and I'm hearing Tiki, and I'm just like all happy. And then you fast forward later to, a whole bunch of other people that were, the current members and stuff. I just like that one. And, really picking your favorite album is like trying to pick your favorite kid. I love them all. But, you might ask me the same question tomorrow.
Right.
I might say Maggot Brain or, Funkadelic. It's just hard to say. But I was like I said, a big fan, man. So they could do no wrong in my eyes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just P-Funk, man. It's just, if you were a kid back then, it was so much stuff to choose from. I mean, you had your favorites, but, that's not to say that you weren't a fan of Ohio players, that you didn't dig Earth, Wind, and Fire, or you just brushed Mandrill aside. It wasn't like that.
No, but you had that one that you just
Yeah.
that would hit you right here.
Oh yeah.
And I could say that Me also being a fan since Beehive, man. I'm still, you know, in love with this group.
Yeah,
Yeah, today, man. That's my group.
yeah. And the funny thing is, too, I wouldn't play because I played them to death. I wouldn't play the recorded versions of that stuff for like years at a time. Then I find myself revisiting it, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's why I fell in love with this band."
Yeah. When he finally got the tour with the band, after being a fan of him anyway, man, you're wilder than I thought, or this isn't as bad, or is it just as wild as I thought it would be? What do you remember when you started?
Well, I realized later because I'm still a kid. I don't have what might be considered an adult discernible opinion in my late teens and early 20s. But I realized later on that that was no way to go into adulthood, with that kind of thing being normal, is just unfair. And I didn't look at it that way. Even when I went home, and I'll come home off the road and, I still, go around there and see my friends in the neighborhood. And even as I'm looking around and seeing where I came from, all of that stuff I was doing and learning out there on the road got to feel kind of normal. That's like, look, this is my job, this is my life,
Yeah,
and I had to sit back and stop at one point and say, well, this isn't, like the access to the things I had being a member of P Funk is not the kind of stuff you have access to when you're just a kid,
yeah,
going to work at the furniture dealer or work at your favorite fast food place or whatever. It's just the things I were exposed to were not, you know, and normal is a relative term, but
but, and it
for
has a
me, it
past.
wasn't considered normal. But I somehow looked at it as such,
Yeah,
and until I thought to myself, wait a minute, I have to really rethink what it is about being an adult. Like there's so many things that people give you or throw at you or give you excuses for because you have some level of celebrity.
mm,
Is you know what it's like? It's like being a really beautiful woman. It's like your life ain't normal because people are just giving you the keys to everything
yeah,
based solely on how you look. And you have to sit back and say, look, I know why this is happening.
yeah,
And I was getting, you know, trinkets and favors and everything because I was a member of a band. And
mm,
that just isn't normal. And but like I said, eventually I grew up and realized just, what kind of world I was living in, and I made the adjustment. It's called wisdom.
that's right.
And every day we're on this planet is a day in a classroom in school.
That's
There are no weekends, there are no holidays. It's school every day.
right.
Then you die, and somebody learns from the lessons you got.
That's the circle of life.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, man. And to mention the P man, you've also played with another uh, gentleman besides George, a couple of other
yeah,
gentlemen that I truly admire and a big fan of. One I want to talk about Chuck Brown, if you don't mind, because you have a history of playing with him and
yeah.
George for several years. But before we get into that, man, I want to know if you can just take a moment to talk about the person that Chuck Brown was, because he was the godfather of Go-Go, and you knew him, you played for him. What kind of man was Chuck Brown?
Chuck was very old school. I mean, it only comes with him being significantly older than the rest of us. He was a lot further down the road in life's lessons, but he was an extremely affable human being. And he was, well, let's put it this way, everybody in the city called him Pops. And they didn't just call him that because he was an older guy. He made everybody feel special.
Yeah,
people walk up to him and say, "Hey, man, Pop, I remember so and so." He said, "Yeah, I remember that." And sometimes he would, and sometimes he wouldn't, but he made you feel
Mhm.
very, very special.
Yeah,
So he was adored by the city,
yeah.
and you know, he was very much about his business. He came up tough, man. He came up on the rough side. You know, he did a stint, and that's where he learned how to play guitar. Where he was on lockdown.
Mhm.
Then you know he was laying bricks. He was a pool hustler, and but he was still a musician the whole time. And what a lot of people don't realize, man, is he had really, really good jazz chops. And I remember the first rehearsal I went to, I got there early because I want to make an impression, right? He was already there. And he was sitting on that amp going through it, playing these fluid bop lines and everything. And then he turned around and saw me. Then he's like, "Oh, okay, well, you know, I'm not going to let it all out the bag just yet." But he really kept how serious a musician he was kind of close to the vest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably was part of his appeal. He was like a an everybody, everyday kind of guy to so many people. And, and now I got to tell you how I got that gig. I was living in LA, and Greg and Benny were kind of like making some moves through the go-go scene. And they said, "Greg, man, you need to move back, man. We need to be a three-piece again." So we moved. I moved back to from LA to DC in '88.
Okay.
And we were playing with this group called Sluggo, which strangely enough was a splintered off group from the Chuck Brown band. You know, they had disagreements and stuff, and they formed their own group.
Okay.
Didn't really get a lot of traction. Then I started playing with Little Benny and the Masters,
Okay.
which, if you a go-go head, you know who that is.
Yeah, for sure.
And we won the same show. It was Chuck one particular time. And Chuck always liked Warren Sexton. He came over and told us, man, he says, "I really like y'all. Y'all the P-Funk boys, right?" He said, "Yeah." You know, he had the deep, gravelly voice.
Yeah.
And he says, "Yeah, I really like y'all." He says, "Y'all should come join my band." And I said, "Listen, now let him finish." Then he said, "I'm the only one in town that's qualified to pay you." I said, "Okay, we'll see about that."
Yeah,
And
you talking.
yeah, that was 1989, and I've been playing in that band since then.
Still studying, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, even after he passed, the band kept going.
Yeah.
You know, I would do it, and of course, you know, if I had obligations like I had to go on tour with P Funk or any one of a number of reasons, you know, I was free to go. And when I got back, I had my spot in the band. So, and he was understanding in that respect. He's like,
That's right.
if you get good musicians, you're not going to be able to hold on to them long. Get used to them leaving every once in a while, but if you treat them right, they'll come back.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it is. Man, that's some history right there.
Oh yeah.
Talk a little bit about go-go music because go-go music, of course, we know it originated out of DC area. You have groups like EU, people, like Chuck Brown, Soul Searchers, and things like that. Uh,
Yeah.
it trickled here, California, some other states, but why do you, in your opinion, why do you think it's never really broadened in other states as big as it is back in Maryland, Baltimore area, DC?
Well, I have two reasons why off the top of my head. One is you can buy a record, you can see a video, but until you go to a go-go, you do not get the full experience of it.
Yeah,
And you know, go-go is so crowd oriented that you buy a ticket to get in, but once the music starts cranking, you and everybody that's bought a ticket, you've become part of the band. You don't get that kind of closeness with your audience with just any kind of idiom. I got to think, you know, okay, second line, you know, down in New Orleans and Zydeco and all of that. Yeah, they'll probably have that too. But there's so much call and response. You know, it's like You go anywhere outside the Beltway and you say, "Tell me what you feel like doing, y'all." And they're like, I don't know, man. I'm kind of hungry." But the response is, "Feel like moving that body."
Move that body.
And everybody knows that, So you're not going to get the real experience of a go-go until you're actually in the presence of a live band doing it. And the second thing is, because go-go is such a special, it's even personal to the people that play it. And sometimes to the detriment of the music, is very protective about who's playing it. Like I heard on numerous occasions, and I ain't want to call no names, but somebody might play it on an award show, or might be from another city, or they might hint at it or something. And people are here in the area, man. We like, they should have called us. They want the real thing. And I was like, I get the real thing, but before they can say what the real thing is and everybody knows what it is, let them embrace the music without any pushback. And I think that, once it becomes a thing where when somebody else is playing go-go and they ain't from DC, it doesn't have to be, stitch by stitch, rhythm by rhythm, authentic. Right. The fact that they love it enough to include it in their repertoire, even if they're not experts at it, it should be enough.
That's true.
Yeah, it should be. So, but right now we're just like the music industry's dirty little secret. People will come to DC, or they'll go to school somewhere outside the area and play a couple of well, I can say it now, tapes. And somebody will say, "What's that?" I say, "Oh, that's go-go, man. That's how we crank in DC." And then the word gets out. But you got go-go bands popping up in, of course, Philly. That's close enough. Yeah. Carolinas, Atlanta, and they even have a band that plays go-go over in the Netherlands.
Wow.
So, but over there it's a niche. Here it's the fabric of the city.
That's the culture. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm glad you kind of broke that down, man, because I always wondered that. Because I think we've had this discussion. I'm a percussionist, and my ears have always been attracted to salsa, Latin, merengue, with a lot of congas, slapsticks, and chimes and bells, and go-go has a lot of that. So I've always been drawn to it, and I love the music, man. And like you said, the call and response is just awesome because, like you said, it's crowd participation. It's like hip hop basically, but
yeah,
edge. It's a lot of back and forth with the crowd and so forth.
Yeah, and especially on the East Coast, the hip hop community has embraced go-go for that reason. It's so similar in a lot of ways. But like, for example, you would think doing the butt that there were going to be numerous bands out there because it shot at the top of the charts. And usually when something's big, all the other label groups or whatever struggle to catch up. But nobody really made a run at doing a go-go hit. And I don't know if they were afraid because they probably come up short from an authenticity standpoint or what. I mean, even after Bustin' Loose, that was like the first real go-go hit. And although it's fair to say that the butt was bigger.
Yeah. But that Bustin' Loose, man, you throw that joint on a party today.
Oh yeah,
on the floor. That Bustin' Loose ain't no joke. That horn, that section on that, everything was hot. I love that song, man.
Oh yeah. And I think Chuck told me, and he might be right, he bumped Michael Jackson out of #1 with Bustin' Loose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Michael was like, can't do no wrong. It was like, I think it was like, don't stop till you get enough or something, rock with you. One of those.
Wow.
Off of that first Off the Wall CD, man. He bumped
79.
79, yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. Wow. I wouldn't be surprised. That song, still today,
Mhm.
right? When I
Yeah,
hear it, everybody's out.
yeah, it stood the test of time, man.
Yeah, man. That joint right there ain't going nowhere. Man, and you have went from Chuck Brown, played with George, and played with the maestro himself, the master, Brother Prince, who is no
Yeah.
longer with us. Um, your entry into playing with Prince and MPG, man. Talk a little bit about your entrance into the MPG band.
Okay, well, look, well, we got to go back a little bit because this
Okay,
is
let's
all part of
backtrack.
how it happened.
Okay,
Uh, I quit playing P-Funk in 96.
okay. Retired.
And then, I was, gigging in the area, doing all like the Chuck Brown band or whatever. And I got a call from Maceo in 98.
So when you say 96, was that right at the awesome Power of a Fully Operational Mothership tour? Right around
It
that?
was, yeah, right after that.
Right after that, okay.
Yeah, right after that. It landed the mothership in Central Park that
Gotcha.
year. Yeah. And I quit at the end of the year.
Okay.
And I was asked to play with Fishbone. They said they need a trombone and a keyboard player. And I told them that I couldn't do it. But they asked me to come down and sit in with them if I felt like it. They were playing at the Bayou in DC. They were opening up for Maceo. So Maceo saw me there and asked me if I would play, solo on a song. I said, yeah, sure. And he asked me, would I be interested in maybe doing 2 weeks in Europe? I said, sure, no problem. So I did those 2 weeks and went back home. And then that was like June. And then September, he called me and asked me, would I be willing to do a month? I said, yeah. And that month turned into all the way up until he stopped playing. So that's from like 98 all the way up to 2020 with a little, hiatus in between. But for the most part, it was straight through.
Right.
And with the association with Maceo was how I was able to get with Prince, because Prince was doing a session somewhere and he kept stressing, play it like Maceo, play it like Maceo. And of course, the bulb was always going off in his head. He says, why don't I just go get Maceo? And he did. And came to see us play. And he saw the chemistry that Maceo and I had together. And he said, Maceo, I want you to join the band and bring that trombone player with you. Now, I hadn't said anything, but Maceo told me later on, he says, yeah, and I told him that you do arrangements and you write out charts and stuff. So as you have a whole bunch of people going in and out of the horn section, you have documented parts as to who plays what. So I was able to come in as a trombonist and a horn arranger. And that was in 2002 when he did One Night Alone. It was that tour when he was the jazz guy. It's like, okay. Yeah, I laugh at that too, because he even had a hollow body like George Benson. And he had George to sign the back of his guitar. But as the tour went on, and from the guitar being against his body, he rubbed the autograph off the back.
No way.
Yeah, it was written on a Sharpie, and it didn't last long. But yeah,
Gotta put some clear tape over it.
yeah, really, But that probably wasn't one of those things he thought of. He's probably thinking more along the lines of what do I play instead of let me preserve this signature.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What was
So
that?
I got in, and the saxophone players in and out. Najee, um, Candy Dolfer, Eric Lees was in and out. Mike Phillips was in and out. Then had Lee Hogan's playing trumpet, and of course Maceo. And it was pretty interesting, man, to say the least.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the bring the fill in the holes
Okay.
between this point and that point. That's how I ended up playing with Prince.
Right. Well, talk about the first gig. What was your first show like with him? Where was that at?
God, it was first off, man, I wasn't nervous at that point
Right.
because he's a big rehearsaholic. He's weeks at a time
Yeah.
working on the show. So we were a well-oiled machine by the time we hit the road. And I can't even remember where the first gig was, but I just remember, there's all of the props, and he's got the grill from a 1970 Grand Prix in front of the keyboards, and all this other
Oh, I remember
cute
that.
stuff. Yeah, but it wasn't like I was nervous and I needed a joint. It wasn't anything like that. I just showed up to work and did what I did and wore what I was supposed to wear, and we knocked it out the box.
Yeah. You remember your first recording? Because you did play on some of the songs on some of the albums too. What was a couple of the first recordings you did with the sessions with them?
Um, well, there were the first recordings, and then there was the first recording that was released. Because if you know anything about Default, he's always recording something. Then he just puts it on the shelf, and when he feels like he wants to throw some of that whatever it is we did on a pizza 2 or 3 years later, he just go in there like it's a spice rack, pull it down, and do what he does to it.
Right.
But the first released recording was Musicology, and the horn section we played three notes, ba and that was it. And then I think we played at the end, but it was mostly synthesizer and it was like backed by the horns. But that was the first recording.
Okay.
Now, I remember the first session, and this is funny because Maceo, Candy, and I in the studio were cutting, and we finished one song. He wants to take a break, so Prince calls me in the booth. He says, "I got an idea that I want you to. I'm gonna write down and give it to you." So okay, so he's got a yellow legal notepad, which I'm looking for him to write it on some blank manuscript paper, right? So he gets a notepad, and then he has a green highlighter, and he writes it and puts it down on the desk and walks away. And I go over and look at it. It says, "Help." And he kind of looked back over his shoulder to see what my reaction was. And I'm thinking to myself, he's one of those guys, you think that he's this serious musician, hard to work for, fire you on the spot. But he let me know right off the top that he had a serious sense of humor.
Oh, you go on to do very, very many other tours with him over the course of the years, and playing with Candy, Maceo, you guys, different incarnations of the MPG. Talk about playing with some of the other groups in between your time with the MPG, because you play with so many other bands, and I would love for you to like name drop some of those bands and the artists that you play with, because you constantly stay so busy, man. And I know you play with Prince and so forth, but there's so many other people in between there. What are some of those people?
Yeah. Well, when I wasn't on tour with Prince, of course I came home and I was playing with Chuck Brown, and sometimes like we would do like the jazz festivals and stuff, and they'll have a house band, and I'll become part of those house bands. It's like, okay, Greg, you quarterback the horn section. And that, and a couple of the TV shows like Soul Train Awards, I do some of that stuff. So you'd have people to come through, like we did a tribute to Anita Baker, and we had all of these people singing her songs like Layla Hathaway and Wapile and Erica Badu, Fantasia, Brian McKnight. They would do all these little medleys and have these guest singers and stuff. And then the same thing would happen when we would go on like the jazz cruises. You have a house band there that's playing for everybody. Yeah. And that's how I got to hook up with George Duke, Stanley Clark again. I played with him in '83, with P-Funk horns. And I gotta stop you there. We were in Atlanta, and P-Funk is playing down the street from Return to Forever. And Dennis invited Lenny and Stanley to come down and check out the show because, of course, P-Funk starts later than everybody. So they're standing on the side of the stage checking us out. And they're like, yeah, I'm really digging what y'all doing. Stanley called P-Funk horns to play on his record in '83. It's called Time Exposure. So that's, I knew him then. So years later, when I'm on this cruise and I'm playing with Stanley and I reminded him about that, he said, man, I remember that. I was like, I'm surprised you remember anything. You were so busy back then. But it was something that it was stuck in his head. So that, and Eric Roberson, Jonathan Butler, Kurt Whalum, Eric Roberson, the list goes on, man. And it's just all of these people. So establish myself and my compadres as horns for hire. Whenever you come in this area, you need some brass. Give Greg a call. That's me, and we make everything happen for you. But that's all really based on having a reputation outside of that, because people hear good stuff about you, they'll call you. They hear bad stuff about you, they won't call you. So I make it a point whenever I'm doing like workshops or seminars, everything. Say everybody's just trying to be the baddest, whatever instrument it is you can be. What you want to do is work. And if you're going to work, you need to do a few things. First off, you need a decent black suit. You can't work without one. Mm-hmm. 2, know the material before rehearsal, not for the show. You don't learn the stuff at rehearsal. I mean, you don't learn this. Yeah, you don't learn it at rehearsal. You already know it. You fine tune it at rehearsal.
Right.
And show up on time. Don't be late. And then when you're on the gig, no drama. Don't be, that person nobody wants to hang around. If you can do those 4 things, you'll work forever. So, and part of that was me being able to work with all of these people that I've had the pleasure and the privilege to play with over the course of my career.
You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? That is wisdom from the trombone. Listen, those 4 things. Listen,
yeah.
Important.
Because it is as nice as it is to be a train or a bird or a Miles, you don't need to be all of that to do most of the work that they hire you for.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about doing jazz at Lincoln Center, it's bets off the table. Then, they want you to step it up there. But, playing locally and for all of these gigs, and those gigs pay well, those agency gigs and, being hired by somebody comes into town and says, who do I call for this person, that person, and they ring your phone. You want to be that person as a professional.
But that's your reputation. So.
Yeah.
Keep that. Keep you working for sure.
Yeah.
So Greg, who are you listening to right now? Who are you digging? Like on a chill day, like who are you popping in your Bluetooth or CD? What do you vibe off of?
Well, I'm always going to go backwards, and I'm not going to be a curmudgeon or a snob about the stuff that's being released recently. I'll just say I have my preferences. Yeah. So, I'll go back and I have a large catalog of George Duke, Herbie Hancock, Train, Miles Davis, Steely Dan, Stevie Wonder, list goes on, Earth, Wind and Fire. And, I'll pepper it in with a whole bunch of old classics like Dexter Gordon and Frank Rosolino and stuff. And so I don't have I'm not pigeonholed at all as to what I listen to. If I could go back in time, man, I would want to go back to the Blue Note era. I would love to have played with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to have played with the second or third lineup of Miles. And I would have loved to have played with Dexter Gordon.
Yeah.
With Sonny Rollins. I would have loved that. And one of the reasons why it's such creative freedom then, but because you were surrounded by these people, they would not let you go in there and rest on anything resembling your laurels. They will always push you to be better.
Right. And another cool thing about those Blue Note recordings, a lot of them were recorded in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Back east.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
a great deal of them.
yeah, man. So yeah, that's some good shit right there, man. I love all those albums.
Yeah, I used to my parents smoked for a while, so I would take the ashtrays and spin them real slow and pretend I was listening to a record. I might have been about 3 or 4 years old then, but I remember I put baby powder on one side so it would look like the Atlantic label, and I was spinning real, and my mom kept cleaning it out, and it made me mad, man.
That's with my record.
Yeah, you messing with my records. Don't touch my daddy's records. And I don't think I've ever told that story before, man, but I remember like it was yesterday.
Yeah, you still remember that. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was Atco. It was like a division of Atlantic, and it was
I remember.
yellow on one side, white on the other.
Right, I remember the
Yeah.
label vividly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I used to like to watch the records go around, just particularly the Blue Note now, because especially in the early '70s when it was the dark blue label, it had the little black B on the top, the top
Yeah.
left hand corner. So yeah, I like the transition albums, when he kind of got into that, like Donald Byrd's Street Lady and Caricatures and all those albums.
Oh yeah.
Gary Bart's Music Is My Sanctuary, all those albums on that label at the time. Yeah, good stuff, man. I could talk about that shit all day.
Yeah. And I even remember my introduction to rock and roll as it was back in the late 60s, early 70s, because my sister, well, she was hanging out with a lot of white kids at work.
Okay.
So she brought home some Paul McCartney and some Jimi Hendrix. I was like, wow, what's this? And, Led Zeppelin and Chicago. And I was like, I think I can get with this.
Yeah.
And then we also had the school bus, the big yellow school bus, taking us to school every morning. We go through the black neighborhood, then we go through the white neighborhood. We all go off to school, and the bus driver would always have it tuned to the rock station. And black folks were like, "Well, Dad, what about us? We like music too." She came up with the idea, and I'm thinking it was not only genius, but it jumpstart the broadening of my horizons when she said, "We're going to alternate days. We're going to play," as she said, then we're going to play the soul station on one day and the rock station on the other day. And she would alternate.
Yeah.
And I just remember being exposed to Carly Simon, Linda Ronstadt, Elton John, David Bowie, all these other people that otherwise had no contact with other than Midnight Special or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, and from my early years, man, from Stones to Zeppelin, man, I was big fan of rock.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I was in between tours, I was playing bass and singing lead in a rock band.
What was the name of the band?
The name of the band was Cruise Control. It was a local band,
Okay.
but we're doing like rock and roll top 40 stuff.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, since you're the only black guy, you get to sing all of the Kool and the Gang and the Earth, Wind and Fire." And I was like, "Hey, look, I can do Rush and Led Zeppelin too, just as well. Don't paint me in a corner."
Oh man! So you was doing some Jimmy Page stuff, singing and
Oh
all
yeah,
that.
we did some Hendrix too, but they wanted to do the current stuff, and Hendrix was maybe about a good 10 years old by then. So, but we had to still put that in the set because he wasn't forgotten. He just wasn't being played on the air as much as he was
Right.
in his heyday.
Awesome. That's awesome. But my man, it's always good catching up with you, man. I'm so glad that you stopped by and share some of your knowledge and wisdom and some of your history and all the great bands and artists that you played with and continue to do your thing and play with locally and all over the world, man. And I know that you're coming up on a tour. You're going to be going back on the road with the P this coming summer. I know you guys are
Yeah. Matter of fact, we're doing a one-off in New Orleans this coming weekend.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
is P-Funk on the 5th and 420 Funk Mob on the 4th. So we're doing those. And then the actual tour kicks off on May 16th in Atlanta. And we're going to be up in, going up the East Coast, headed west, and we're going to end up out in the PNW before we do a couple of dates in Canada and then one more in New York. And then that's going to wrap it up for the summer.
Cool. Any upcoming dates?
Oh, forgot. July 22nd, we'll be doing George's birthday over in the UK.
Wow.
Taking
it elsewhere. Huh?
Yeah. It's funny, man. Since I've been back in the band, we've been to Britain twice, but have not been the GMT +1 Europe. We haven't been in the 6 hours from the East Coast time zone in Europe. So a lot of people in Germany, France, Spain, Switzerland are clamoring for some of this funk.
Wow.
But I'm hoping something's going to be done about that soon, because there's a whole nother audience over there. We've even been to Japan, but we haven't been to Europe.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. You guys got to just wear their ass out with that funk.
Oh yeah.
They gonna love it. Yeah.
And I love that about going outside the country, and especially in Europe, and especially Japan, is they have much more of a desire for music played by actual musicians, and especially the blacker stuff, the funk, reggae, and go-go and all of that kind of thing, man. You show up there, man, they got every record you ever made, and they ask for a signature, they mean it.
Yeah.
They mean it, yeah.
Definitely appreciate love soul music to the fullest. That I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they love and appreciate it fully. That's good. And do you got any upcoming dates with Chuck Brown's band or anything coming up soon too as well?
Yeah, we just did one actually right down the street from my house here in Columbia, Maryland,
Wow.
this past weekend. And there's some stuff coming up. I don't have it memorized off the top of my head, but we're doing some stuff in the area. So if you go to winemeupchuck.com, all of the dates are right there. That's winemeupchuck.com.
That's our dear Chuck Brown followers, man. Check
Yeah.
Again. They are just as bad as they were when he was here with us, man. Check them out.
Oh yeah.
And
it's funny too, the influences of funk into the go-go thing, like Wind Me Up is definitely from Bootsy.
Yeah.
But people in the crowd, man, just start saying "Wind Me Up, Chuck" as a way to get the whole thing started.
Yeah.
And you don't know that until you've been to a go-go. And I'm playing with Trouble Funk this Friday.
No way.
Yeah. Big Tony celebrating his birthday, and he asked me to come down there and play with the band. So I'm playing with them this Friday. And he was telling me about how when they made Don't Touch That Stereo, it was directly a result of Don't Touch That Radio, Don't Touch That Knob. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to play with some of the big tier go-go bands, Chuck, Trouble, Backyard, fronted by Anwan Glover, aka Genghis, aka Big G, who everybody will probably know as Slim Charles on The Wire, and never played with Rare Essence, but I played on the same show with them. So, I bounced around a few go-go bands here in the area too. And I might not be as well known in the go-go community as some of the big players like Sugar Bear and Big Tony and all of those folks, but I've been there. Been in the thick of it. Because my wife asked me, said, "We're gonna move so and so. I don't like it here in DC anymore." I was like, "Look, they ain't got no crank. I ain't moving." So staying right here.
Stay right there. So you gonna let the
I
music.
love what I like and I like what I love. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what keeps you young. That's what keeps you know, hungry for the music. It's your love. It's your passion.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's what drives you. So you got to keep that, man. Don't ever let go of that.
Yeah. And back to my wife again. She's like, aren't you going to retire? I said, musicians don't retire, they die. Really. It,
You
it,
don't know
it,
yet.
as you know now. But, music keeps you young, man. It does. I mean, shoot, I'm going on 66, man. Every time they drop that downbeat, I feel like I'm off and running.
And by the way, man, but speaking of which, because I know you were cycling a lot. I haven't seen you cycling lately. Are you still into your cycling?
Yeah, but the touring is interrupting my schedule, man.
Yeah,
We're out
I
on
kind of
the
figured
road.
as much, but
Yeah.
uh,
The last time I was on my bicycle was November.
okay.
Yeah. And I was like, and I haven't had a chance to ride it lately. I got some issues that I got to get out the way before I can get back on that bike again.
I
I
hear
can't
you.
sit on the saddle no more than a minute, man. It hurt like a motherfucker.
Yeah, make some changes.
Yeah, but no, I'm still cycling. Once I get past a few physicalities, I'll be back out there again,
I hear you, man.
and hopefully I'll be primed for my annual 100-mile ride over on the eastern shore of Maryland. So
Cool, cool.
yeah, if not this year, because last couple of years has been interrupted by work schedule.
Oh,
But yeah, and if we're close on the East Coast, I'll just drive and take my bicycle with me, which is what I did last summer.
mhm.
I ride the sound check, ride in between,
Right.
but you can't drive and ride at the same time because your legs are so tired. You get in there and hold the gas pedal down for hours at a time, you'll cramp up.
Yeah,
So I had to be very selective, and
right.
but
Balance it
but
out.
anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I'm still riding.
Good, good. Yeah, I know I haven't seen because I know at one point you were posting a lot. You're kind of keeping up with it on your distance and things like that. I know it kind of
Yeah.
stopped, but I figured it's kind of touring was kind of hindering that for a minute. But I know you'll get back into the group.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. My brother, I'm so honored and thankful to have you on and have you back here visiting with me and catching up. And I know you dropped the information for Chuck Brown. If you want to catch you on the tour with them, go ahead and drop your Instagram or Facebook, any way to contact you and find out where you're going to be touring with the different groups that you travel with.
Yeah, Instagram or Facebook, either one. Just search Greg Boyer, and don't click on the professor from New York or the gardener from Hawaii. That's not the same one. So,
Look for a trombonist.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like remember this face. If you see that, you're in the right spot.
There you go. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, multi-talented trombonist, arranger, performer, my buddy, my brother, Greg Boyer. Thank you so much, man. Thank you again.
Man, and thank you so much for considering me as a guest on your show, man. I'm
Oh
privileged.
man, no thoughts about it at all, man. It just always want to talk to you and catch up, man. It's always good to pick your brain and just talk a little music with you. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ladies and
Okay.
gentlemen, see you next on the next go around. Digital Soul presents. Have a good evening. Thank you.